Well, dude, thanks for doing the podcast, man. I know we've been talking about this for quite some time.
Yeah.
I mean, how long have you been up here now?
So September of 2021 is when I got here. So I was, actually we lived on Whidbey for about 2 months prior, before our house was finished. So
that's right. And then your house was a pretty slow process, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
You have a lot of stuff to take care of.
Yeah, we had like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months of construction. You know, we moved in and my partner, you know, I thought it was a turnkey house and she had other ideas. She's like, no, I want to change this in the kitchen, change this and this. And so they had to do a bunch of construction while we were waiting to move in.
Because I remember Craig was helping you out with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, there's a lot of stuff to get done up there.
Yeah. So.
Man, that's crazy. I was thinking it was like maybe a year.
No, it's been 2. I unfortunately, because I haven't been able to come consistently here. So that's my biggest regret, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm sure, I mean, every time you do a podcast, everyone wants to talk about carnivore and steak and all that, which I'm sure we'll get into that. But, you know, just as I was walking in, you were doing a private with Daniel, one of the black belts here. Mm-hmm. And the topic literally came up right before we pushed record. It's like, do you feel really beat up after practice? And obviously sometimes I do. Like jiu-jitsu can be hard, but more often than not, I would say no, you know? And you said probably because at a higher level, you can control the pace a little bit. And I think that's huge because in my opinion, that's one of the biggest things going from white belt to blue belt is being able to have a lot of control over how much energy you're expending. Yeah. Cause like, I mean, you know, you like out of the gates, you got one speed and it's kill, you know? And I love that you roll like that. I feel like that's probably your old rugby days coming back. Yeah. But have you found in the last year or so, like any ability to tailor that? Or do you still just like to fight to the death every time?
Well, I mean, you know, it depends on the opponent sometimes. You know, there's some guys that you know that you can safely roll hard with. And, well, you know, I mean, you've been doing this forever. And, you know, like I can go hard with this guy and I can't go as hard with somebody else. I mean, I don't, you know, as a white belt, I don't have that many people that I can sort of easily handle. You know, it's still, everybody's going to be a kind of a fight. So, I mean, I don't ever like, I mean, even though I roll hard, I'm never like crazed like as hard as I possibly can. I think that's kind of goofy to do that anyway.
Of course it is. Yeah.
You know, because I think you're going to hurt somebody, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to make some stupid mistakes. So I still try to, you know, maybe 90% sometimes, you know, I mean, maybe with you, I might try to go harder. You always kill me. But, yeah, I mean, it's you know, and I don't know, like the soreness, you know, like I said, this is, you know, I'm 56. I don't need to be doing this. I don't have to be doing this, but I'm doing it because I'm having a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. And you know, maybe it's, you know, doing it at an older age, you know, you get slammed against the floor, or, you know, you get somebody stepping on your ribs, you know, it's like, but I mean, honestly, I think it's just like building up calluses, you know, I mean, I'm sure like the more you do it, the more your arm gets stretched out, you kind of get used to that. And I've kind of noticed that to some degree, like, you know, the first few weeks I was pretty damn sore. Yeah. You know, and now it's like not as much.
And I should definitely say, when I say I don't get sore, I'm referring to like just muscular soreness.
Yeah.
From like the workout aspect of it. Yeah. I get tweaked and bumped and stuff. Like my neck, actually we were rolling the other day and you had a collar tie. And you were trying to, I think it was right after you and Dan were working snap downs and you were kind of pulling and I felt my neck. It wasn't anything serious, but you know how sometimes you can just feel a little twang. Yeah. And then the next day it was a little sore from that. Yeah. But that's also jiu-jitsu life.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, I've just started doing a little bit of the more no-gi stuff and it feels better. You know, I mean, I think one thing, the gi just beats up my hands so damn much.
It does.
I mean, I found like, you know, like you get tied in the grip and somebody breaks your grip. So.
Well, dude, I'll tell you the pro tip on that is, especially when you're training with the same, I mean, we have a big team, but you get to know your team. And like, if Tyler Stanaway is going to break a grip,
let him.
I relinquish the grip. Yeah. Because 2 of his hands versus 1 of my hand, the only thing it's going to do is cause trauma to my fingers. You know, and I'm past the days where I'm just like, I'm going to hold on as hard as I can and see if you can break it. Now, sometimes I do that still, because if you can get away with that, you know that it kind of breaks their spirit a little bit. You know, grip fighting is a lot of psychological warfare too. But when I know guys have the strength to shuck grips, use it as an opportunity. And as they snap that, right before they snap it, I'll release and then regrip with the other side. Or one that would be good for you that I've been doing a lot of lately is just shoulder control, you know, because you're taller than most people in the gym. So you can have that shoulder control and it just completely shuts down wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if I can break their posture just enough to, you know, get my arms around their neck, you know, like a front headlock or something like that, then I'm like, okay, I can get you to the ground. I'm pretty confident I can, you know, that's you know, just leaning on them, you know.
Dan showed you the cow catcher, right?
Yeah, I actually,
that'd be a good one.
I did that last night or Sunday night. I got that on one of the guys, Nick's one of the cops. And so
to get that on Nick is legit.
Yeah, well, I was pretty happy with it. I mean, I fell into his guard. So I mean, I still landed in his guard, but I got him on his butt.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of like, you know, I was like, okay, that's pretty good.
Joao was teaching. We just had the Guns and Geese last weekend, and he was teaching the cow catcher, but he has a thick Portuguese accent. And one of the students raised his hand and goes, I don't understand what you're saying. Is this move called the cock catcher? And he goes, no, it is not called that. And we're not doing that. We're doing the cow catcher.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. So I know you trained a little jiu-jitsu before you moved up here. Mm-hmm. But you didn't really you didn't immerse yourself in it very much down in California, did you?
Well, I mean, I started at, you know, I mean, in all credit, I mean, they're good school. It was a Gracie Barra headquarters in Irvine, California. And, you know, Philippe was the head, Philippe what's Philippe's last name? Anyway, he's a solid coach. But I mean, their program is such that you don't get to roll early on. So I did very little rolling. We did a little bit of positional stuff. And so my first day here was a Friday night. And, you know, Friday night's just 90 minutes of straight rolling. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. I mean,
yeah, but that's good. Yeah, you're a savage.
Yeah, but I was like, yeah, that's fun.
A guy like you, and I have an issue with that. And, you know, people will ask me, what do you think of Gracie Barra? And I always tell them it's a franchise. And typically whoever the head professor is kind of sets the tone for the gym. And there are some that are absolutely phenomenal, and then there's some that aren't. And the same can be said for Checkmat, you know. But I've always thought it was bizarre that they don't want people live rolling for, was it 6 months or something?
Like, I think they want you to be a 3-stripe white belt, which however long that takes, 4 months, 6 months, something like that. So, you know, you do some like positional rolling, like, you know, somebody starts in mountain, you'll practice escapes and roll for like a few minutes. But I mean, it wasn't like 6 minutes on the clock, let's go.
Yeah.
None of that stuff. So,
dude, I've always said, I think that's where you can drill, you can like do dry runs or situational sparring or watch all the videos you want, but the magic happens during live rounds, because that's where you find your timing, and that's where you see what works for you and what doesn't work. And that's also what's the most fun.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I can't even imagine sitting on the sidelines for 6 months watching people train. Like, that doesn't seem like a very good business model.
I mean, I guess, you know, they're doing okay with that. But I mean, it was like, you know, you do the class, it would be whatever, an hour. And then they say, okay, you guys that are certain levels can roll, and everybody else, you kind of go home. So you just kind of left and like, okay, you know, I guess it's a reward for sticking around long enough. But I mean, the little bit of positional rolling we did, that was my favorite part. It was like,
yeah, of course.
There's some real, there's some work out here, you know. It's because, like, you know, I like to work out pretty hard. I mean, I trained hard my whole life, and that's the fun part. You know, that's the reward, I guess.
You know, I was actually just talking with some of the coaches yesterday, because we're now offering 101, which is more of just like an introduction to some different positions. And it's a 6-week rotating curriculum. And as part of that, we say it doesn't include rolling. Now, if you want, like you've seen, if you want to come downstairs afterwards and roll, you're open to. But we've had some people that haven't rolled at all. And now I'm kind of like, should they get 1 6-week rotation and then they have to roll? Because I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Like, not rolling, that's not really congruent with our team's values.
That's
you know?
True. That's true. I mean, I think. I guess you strongly encourage. I mean, I guess somebody's got an injury, or they're like,
of course,
frail, like 70-year-old or something like that.
Or a frail 30-year-old.
We have too many of those, unfortunately. Not here, but in society, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
No, because I was just thinking, I was like, well, fuck, man, what if someone is part of my team for a year and doesn't roll? And then they're like, yeah, I've been training with him for a year, and you're not rolling? That doesn't make sense, dude.
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody would want to do that, you know. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some.
Remind me, I got a story to tell you off air before you go today. I don't want to throw anyone on our team under the bus though, but it's a good one. How is jiu-jitsu like impacted you so far since you've moved up here?
Man, my biggest regret is I can't do it as much as I want. I think about it quite a bit. I'm at home watching friggin' John Danaher videos. It's like I'm like, trying to do that stuff. At this stage in my life, it's I think it's a lot of friendship. It's a camaraderie type of thing. I really like, because I've time with my family and all that stuff and work and all that stuff, but this is like fun for me. This is my fun time. And, the mental aspect of it is just as important to me as a physical aspect of it. Because, I can go and work out and get in shape. There's plenty of ways to do that, but this is a workout that requires tremendous amount of mental growth. It's not just thinking, how do I counter this move or how do I succeed, but it's also, this sucks. And, you get somebody laying on you or they're laying on your face and you can't breathe and you're like, this fucking sucks. And, you're just kind of like, how do you deal with that? And I say it's a perspective builder, because any difficulties that I have in life right now, like, well, nobody's trying to choke me. It's not that bad, right? That's a shitty day, but hey, no one's out there choking me to death,
No, and I say all the time when this topic comes up, it's like, even if it's a training environment and it's your friend that's choking you, like, your brain, your reptilian brain still recognizes it as combat and as a threat.
Right.
Because if it didn't, why would it start all those fight or flight hormones and like give you that anxious feeling and make you feel like, oh, I got to get out of here, And what I've noticed, and it's still, I hit 20 years of jiu-jitsu this year and I still get that. Like that, you can definitely train yourself to move the goalpost to where it takes a lot more before you get there. But I think you can find it in you still with almost anybody. And that's why I always say when people are like, you can't teach heart, I think that you can teach heart, because you put someone through enough of those bad positions for years on end, it doesn't bother them anymore. And last week, Tyler Stanaway had me in half guard like he always does. I had him in half guard, but he was, because he's so good at half guard on the bottom, he has a very good passing game on top. And he hit me with a crossface that flattened my shoulder to the ground, and it was so tight that it felt like my jaw was about to pop. And I remember sitting underneath him, and I was like, I could allow this discomfort to bother me, or I could just say, you know what? Give me even more pressure. Let's see what you got, And I was like, this isn't everything he has. This could be worse. And because it could be worse, you know what? It's not that bad. All these weird little conversations that probably take 2 seconds to go through in your head, but most people aren't going through that kind of stuff in their normal day-to-day life, Yeah.
I remember one thing you said like early on was never tap to pressure. And I never have so far.
Hell yeah.
And I've been in some places where like this, you get someone like Craig laying on your face, and intentionally grinding you to make you as miserable pops. You're just like, okay, I can last another 10 seconds, another 30 seconds. I know he's got to move eventually. I for the very first time, I actually got, I got choked out where I went unconscious. It was a couple nights ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was up in the fundamentals class, and we were doing. I can't remember what choke we were doing, but it was. Mark was teaching it. It was, just a choke from side control, and I was, letting him choke me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to tap, and then I went out.
Just during drilling, huh?
Yeah, just during drilling.
That's crazy.
But it was almost a pleasant experience. That was weird. It was like, oh wow, that's kind of weird. And I woke up like 10 seconds later and went back to rolling. But so it was the first time that ever happened. So it's been 2 years, and I know you've been out a few times.
Yeah. Yep. And I don't there's some guys that pride themselves on fighting until they go unconscious. And if it's in a tournament or something, I get that, right? Yeah. But during training, I'm not one of those guys. I will push it as hard as I can. Don't get me wrong. But when it's time to tap, I tap. However, people think that it has something to do with air, and it doesn't. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with how long you can hold your breath or how long it's been since your last breath. The correct positions of chokes shut the blood to your brain off. And so sometimes it comes on so quick that you don't even really notice.
Yeah, that's what happened to me, because I've been, we drilled chokes hundreds of times now, and I've tapped, okay, I'm done, but this, I was planning on tapping, but I just, for whatever reason, just happened too quick. And I'm glad I had that experience. You know, like, you know, you're kind of like, well, what it's going to be like? You're going to piss your pants or something.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anybody do that? Everybody like
I have not. I've heard stories about
yeah,
that kind of stuff, but I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't had that. Didn't happen either. So that was good though.
How's the 101 been? Have you been enjoying that upstairs?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, just some of the position, you know, just making sure that the basic movement patterns are solid. I mean, there's some that are, I'm good at some and not as good as others. You know, like I said, trying to teach this old body to, you know, do what it's supposed to do. You know, like I said, you know, like not everybody's going to be good at every single position in jiu-jitsu. I mean, just based on the physique and anatomy and stuff like that. So some of the things, some of the inversions and stuff, I'm not quite as ready for yet, but I'm working on it. I'm trying, you know?
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. And the thing is, it's like that 101 course, initially it was designed for new people coming in, but now that it's been going on for a month or two, I'm seeing a lot of people rotate through there and blue belts and stuff just to go upstairs and revisit the basics for a day or a week or two. And a lot of people have been really happy about that. Yeah. And but I mean, we didn't have the space to do it before anyways. So like you said though, like we had 45 people the other day. The expansion is already at capacity, it looks like.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So yeah, dude, I wanted to I know you do podcasts all the time, and a lot of people that are going to listen to this are probably pretty familiar with you, but I thought it'd be cool to kind of like go all the way back to the beginning and talk about like where you came from, and then kind of geek out on your military and your rugby career and stuff like that. Cause I feel like that's the side of you that a lot of people don't know, but it's also fascinating, you know? Yeah. Where'd you grow up at?
So I grew up I moved around a lot. So my dad was in the military for a while. Okay. So I was actually born in Germany. I was there about a year. Then I moved down to Mississippi and Georgia as a little baby. Then I spent, up until about 5th grade in the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana. Lived in there. Grew up. Actually, it was longer than that. I was about 15. And I was a basketball player. And I grew up in Indiana, where Bobby Knight was. I don't know if you know, familiar with Bobby Knight. He was coaching the.
I'm not.
Indiana. He was just fraud. He was a hard ass coach. He was one of these guys that like threw chairs across the floor. He was on the news for this stuff all the time, and he was super hard ass. And so all the coaches aspired to be Bobby Knight in Indiana, the high school coach. So it was hard ass stuff. And then we moved to Texas, where they didn't really care about basketball. It was all football, but I still played basketball. And I was too skinny. I mean, I was 6'5", 160 pounds, 170 pounds. And this is when I started lifting. I started like realizing you're too fucking skinny.
So you've been 6'5" since you were young, huh?
Yeah, I mean, since I was probably 16 or something like that. So, but I mean, then I started lifting weights at 14, but it still takes a while. It takes a while, and it took me a long time to put on weight. So then I graduated high school in Texas, went to college, University of Texas, got a BA in biology, was powerlifting at the time, started powerlifting. That's when I started kind of really lifting, and I went to collegiate nationals. I think I took 5th or something like that at the time, and then started medical school. And then it was kind of funny. The gym that was a local gym in Galveston, Texas. I was at University of Texas Medical Branch. His name was Paul McCartney. Now, he wasn't the Paul McCartney, but that was his name. And
he's a Paul McCartney.
He's a Paul McCartney. He was a chiropractor, big rugby guy. And he was from my hometown. I kind of had known him, but he was like, "Hey, dude, if you want to keep working out at my gym, you need to play rugby." He was kind of like sort of goofing around, but I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." Uh-huh. And so I ended up. I was kind of a natural athlete, pretty fast. I could jump pretty high. I was, at that time, by that time I was probably 240. Through college, I got up to about 240. So started playing, played on the local team, made the Texas team, made the Western U.S. team, was advancing pretty rapidly through the ranks. And then I was in medical school, and I was married at the time, and we ended up getting divorced. And I was like, we just didn't work out. It was a short marriage, didn't work out. And at the time I was like, hell. And I had an offer to go play professionally in New Zealand. And I was like, well, I could continue finishing medical school, or I can go play rugby right now. I was like, no, I'm going to go play fucking rugby.
Yeah, why not, dude?
So I dropped.
Yeah, how old were you then?
I was like
21
23 or something
23?
like that. I was in medical school, 23, 24. And I was like, well, I can do medical school later, I think, hopefully.
Dude, how does that even happen? Like, you're playing rugby, and I mean, they have fucking scouts out.
Well, I mean, so the thing was, it was interesting. One of the university professors was from New Zealand. Okay. And he was, part of a team, And they always, like, every year they had brought like one import from South Africa. They had a couple Americans, and you know, I was actually pretty decent at the time. So they said, hey, would you be interested to come in this year to play for our team? I said, yeah. I mean, it just worked out well. So I had to drop out of medical school. It was much to the dismay of the medical school professors, because I was, you know, a pretty good student. They're like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, I was like, I'm gonna play rugby.
You're ruining your career.
Right. So I did that. I went to New Zealand. I stayed there for 2 seasons, played against, I played in their Premier League. So it was like it was like where all the best players would play. So some of the, you know, if you're familiar with rugby, there's a team called the New Zealand All Blacks, who's traditionally been the best in the world. So they have the best guys. So I got to play against a lot of those guys. They'd be on the other team. Like there'd be 2 or 3 All Blacks on the other team, and, you know, got to play with some of those guys. And I'd only been playing like 2 years. So I mean, I was like a rookie playing against, you know, the best guys in the world. So, so that was a good experience. So then I came back after they basically kicked me out of the country, because it's like you can only stay there for so long. You know, it's like New Zealand is not very friendly about, even though you're like, I mean. Well, I mean, they had plenty of rugby players. They could give a shit. I mean, it's not like I had some skill that they didn't have. I mean, it was you know, so I mean, if you went over there as like a neurosurgeon or something like that, they might let you stay longer, and they do. But I mean, you know, they had plenty of rugby players. So I go back, and then I was like, I'm not in the middle, you know, I'm not, I don't really have a job. You know, I'm not in medical school anymore, and I didn't want to stop playing. I wanted to keep playing. So I joined the military. I joined the Air Force at the time. And it's kind of funny. I was sitting around with the local rugby team, and they had a guy from the Navy, they had a guy from the Army, they had a guy from the Marines, they had a guy from the Coast Guard, and every single one of them said, hey, dude, just go in the Air Force. They're all like, these other ones suck. And my dad was in the Air Force, so I joined the Air Force, went in, and I worked as a nuclear weapons launch officer. So the ICBMs, nuclear bombs, I was the guy that would, you know, launch them. So we trained to do that, and we did, we had World War III multiple times in training anyway, never obviously really. But I played for the Armed Forces team. I continued to play rugby for the military team.
So when you moved home, you wanted to continue playing rugby, and you looked in the military. Like when you go to MEPS, is there an understanding like this is going to be part of your career, or is it you just knew you were good enough to get on?
No, I mean, I assumed I was good enough, and you know, I went, you know, they had a base team, and they had an Air Force team, and Armed Forces team, and so.
Do they still do that?
I think so.
Okay.
I believe they do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they still do. And so, but I mean, that was one of the reasons when I looked around. This is back in the early '90s or mid '90s, and there wasn't much high level rugby played, you know, where you could play internationally outside of the military, and I wanted to play at a high level. Okay. So. That was the decision behind that, and I wasn't ready to go back to school, and I was just having too much fun, you know. So I did that, and stayed for another 7 years of rugby I played.
You played for 7 years?
7 years, yeah, wow. High level, and then
that's a long time. It feels like.
It was till I was 30, so I started like 23, stopped at 30, and when I was 30, I was playing this tournament up in Las Vegas. I was playing for a team called the Denver Barbarians at the time, so I was stationed in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'd come down to Denver to play with the rugby team. So I'd drive down, you know, a couple nights a week and practice and go to the games. And we were playing this team from Russia in this tournament. And I remember I was having a good match. I scored 3 tries, which is pretty remarkable for, you know, it's like a hat trick in hockey. It's like a pretty big accomplishment. But at the same time, I was laying at the bottom of a pile, and this Russian guy was just kicking me in the head over and over again. And I got up, and I had blood come out of my ears. And I was 30, and I was like, you know what? I'm done. Fuck it. There wasn't any more I could do. I mean, I was already kind of at a point where, it was like, I'm kind of getting old for this sport. So I said, okay, I'm going to go back to medical school. So the Air Force, paid for me to return to medical school, and then I had to go back in. I did that. I finished it at university back in Galveston, Texas. I finished up, and then did my residency, 5-year surgical residency, and then went back in the military. And then that's when I got deployed to Afghanistan and did all the crazy trauma stuff. So that's kind of the genesis. So when you. I mean, you just brushed over a lot of stuff there, but when you're getting kicked in the head, the reason I find this fascinating, because you hear this with fighters sometimes, where you'll see guys in the octagon and they just went through a gnarly fight and they're like, you know what, that's it for me. Just like a moment in time, they realize this is just too much. And I was actually going to ask you about that, because you always hear gnarly stories of fingers getting bent backwards, and it's just a fucking
dogfight in there, right? Is that understood and that's part of the rules?
Yeah, obviously it's a very physical sport, and it's similar to football. I mean, football evolved from rugby, but there's no pads on, and there's people throwing punches. When there's one referee to manage 30 guys, and it's like and tempers flare like you might imagine. You're running into each other, and people do shit you don't want.
Testosterone-filled wild animals fighting each other.
But it's understood. I mean, that's the field, and then afterwards you go up, shake hands, and have a drink together or something like that. And it's kind of pretty collegial for the most part. I mean, sometimes grudges get carried over, but yeah, I remember when I was in New Zealand, and they were very, if you got caught like cheap shotting or dirty, they would fine you, they'd kick you out, you wouldn't be able to play, suspend you for a while. I mean, it was pretty serious. But at the same time, it happened. They just when the ref wasn't looking, somebody sneak a punch in. And I remember like in the scrummage, you guys are like, everybody's bound together, right? And they're like, your arms are interlocked. And I remember one guy, he was on the All Blacks, and he told me, "Hey, dude, on this next scrum, I want you to slip your bind and punch the hooker in the face." I'm like, what? I was like, what? Okay. So I did, and I reached down there and I popped him up in the face, and you hear "fuck," and the referee looks around, he knows something happened, and he thought it was me, but he didn't catch me. And I remember after the match, he was kind of coming up to me, "Hey man, it was a good job getting away with that. I don't know what you're talking about, dude." It was kind of, it was totally like, but that was the deal. I mean, we had a pair of twins. Kind of funny. We had two twins. They're the Hirwini brothers. They were two Maori twins, and they looked, they were twins. They looked like each other. So sometimes they would like do stuff, and the ref would like, "Wait a minute, was it you?" They couldn't catch who it was.
Oh,
so they kind of let them slide because they were twins for some reason. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some of that. I mean, I'm sure in jiu-jitsu there's guys that do cheap shit,
of course,
and stuff. But it happens. It's guys, whatever.
So then, when you decided to go back to medical school, the military, like, did you have to re-enlist or how did that work? Because you got out and went as a civilian, right?
Yeah. So
but with the understanding you're going back,
right? With the understanding I'm going back. So I had incurred a commitment for these guys, like a 4-year commitment, because I paid for the schooling, and actually it ended up being like 4.5 years.
Did you have to? What rank were you when you decided to do that?
So I got out as a captain when I did the nuclear weapons stuff.
Okay.
And then I came back in it was kind of weird. I had to wear at first in officer training school, because I went to OTS as a nuclear weapons guy. That's how it works. So I go to medical school, I drop out to go play rugby, I go back in, I sign up, they put you as a staff sergeant, like an
E6?
No, it's like an E3 or something.
Oh,
like
okay.
That.
So all your ranks are different.
Yeah, while you're in training, and then I get out, and then I come in as a second lieutenant. Do that. I'm a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and then captain, and then I go out, and then I go as a civilian for a while, and then I think they had me back as a second lieutenant, as a first lieutenant or second lieutenant. It was weird. It was like a weird thing. Like I got demoted for a while, and then I came back in captain, and then I put on major pretty quickly, and then I got out. I was in for another 5 years, and I put on lieutenant colonel right as I was leaving. They promoted me. I'm like, well, I'm getting out anyway, so I wore it for 3 months or something.
Was that their attempt at trying to get you to change your mind and stay?
Well, I mean, there was some of that, but I mean, I looked at the pay scale, like what I could make as an orthopedic surgeon in private practice versus what I could make in the military, even with retirement and gaining a try. It was like I had to stay in to it didn't make sense for me to separate unless I already had 18 and a half years in. And at that time I had 10. I was like, well, there's no financial incentive for me to do that. And I was like, I like the military, but I've been poor for 25 years of training. I've been in schooling in the military, and I was like 30. Yep. I was almost 40 at the time, and then I was like, I need to go make some money.
Yeah, exactly. All the other doctors are, because you went through. Was medical school a combination of people on your program and then a bunch of civilians that weren't going into the military?
Yeah.
Okay. So you see them off getting rich. It's like 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of surgical training. You're 13 years of training. Yeah.
And you're getting paid minimum wage. I mean, the whole time you're in residency, they pay you you're working 120 hours a week, and they're paying you $40,000 a year. You add the hours up, you're below minimum wage, and you're working your ass off, and they take advantage of it. It's basically kind of like slave labor.
I know, right? When you went into medical school, How did the process work to you becoming an orthopedic surgeon?
Yeah. So
did you know that that's what you wanted to do?
I pretty much did. I mean, it's kind of like the jock of doctors, you know, because you most of them are ex-athletes or athletes. You deal with a lot of athletes. You know,
Okay.
you deal with the musculoskeletal system. You know, I've been lifting weights. I kind of knew a little bit about the musculoskeletal system, and really, orthopedics is one of the most competitive specialties. I mean, you got to be like graduate top of the class or right near the top of the class to get into it. So it's like you don't just decide, oh, I want to do this. It's like, you know, if you get crappy grades, you're like, well, you're going to go into pathology or psychiatry or something. I mean, not that there's not good ones, but I mean, it's really there's a rank order, and like the top guys get the pick of the litter. They get to pick, you know, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon, a plastic surgeon, a radiologist, or something, a dermatologist. Those are usually like the most competitive fields for whatever reason. The reason is because
where's proctologist at?
Well, I mean, it's like I guess it'd be a subspecialty of GI, and it's probably kind of in the middle. You know, kind of in the middle. But, you know, no, I don't know if there's any special. I don't think there's any real. Maybe there's a few proctologists, but I mean, it usually falls under gastroenterology. But yeah, so I mean, it's like, you know, it's like to do orthopedics in this country anyway, at least for the last 30 or 40 years, it's like really hyper competitive. You got to be top grades, top on the board scores. You got to be like a good person. You know what I mean? It's very much dominated by athletic dudes that are like high performers. I mean, usually it's kind of like fighter pilots, kind of like, you know, it's kind of like this is, you know, or maybe some of the top special operators, you know, like these are guys that are like really hard charging. So you kind of have to meet that criteria. And, you know, even still today, I mean, I think orthopedics has like, you know, 8% women. I mean, it's really much a male-dominated field. So, and I was fine with that. I was like, cool. I mean, I'm all for. Yeah, if you got what it takes to do it, good. But I mean, you know, it's like because it's hard work. I mean, it's physically.
Yeah, you were telling one story, I think after class one day, talking about like driving a rod down a femur or some shit like that, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean,
whereas like you're hammering.
Yeah, well, it's usually taking them out because when you have to back slap, like you'll fix somebody's tibia with you take a titanium rod down there and you'll fix the bone, and then sometimes they have to come out for whatever reason. Sometimes the hardware's irritating or they get infected or something like that, and the bone grows around them, and they don't just slide out. I mean, you got to sit there and fucking. We have like a back slap hammer, and you just slapping and slap. You're like sweating, you're pounding on it for like 10 minutes. It's like it's a chore. I mean, so it's like,
dude, that's gnarly.
It's like, yeah, you see somebody in there and they're just like wailing. I mean, they're like, oh, bam, and hitting that shit as hard as they possibly can. And give me a bigger hammer. And so it's kind of fun stuff. I mean, I like that stuff. It's fun. It's like a workout. You know, workout while you're doing that. But it's
that's why you got to be an athlete to be an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones, like some of the smaller, they'll go into hand surgery. It's all delicate. You know, like give me my loops and the 10-0 stuff to suture with. You know, they suture with like suture that floats on air. It's so thin. You know, it's like, you know, all of the I didn't like that stuff. I like give me the big stuff where I can hit stuff with a hammer.
So was there ever a period like? Or was right out of medical school, then you go into orthopedics as a specialist? Or did you have to do like residency as a regular doctor and then go into a specialty?
Yeah, you do. You go into an orthopedic residency where you're, but I mean, the first year is called your internship, where you're kind of doing like a little of everything. You do like, general surgery, trauma surgery, vascular surgery, and those were like, you're like, I'm glad I didn't go into this fucking specialty because some of it really sucked. I mean, it was just like, like the vascular surgery, everybody's a friggin' chronic smoker and everything, you go in there, it's like, you're just cutting off legs all the time. And, it's like, so you're doing
all of your residency then at civilian hospitals prior to your commitment back to the Air Force?
Right. So you get fully trained. Then you go into the Air Force, and then you start out like I went to New Mexico. I went to Kirtland Air Force Base. And, I just seeing regular patients, doing regular operations. But then they deploy you, and then the shit hits the fan. And it's like, okay, this is the real hardcore stuff. Because the deployment stuff, I was in Bagram, Afghanistan, which is a major hub for all like the journey. The theater stuff, and you get like crazy trauma, like stuff I never saw as a civilian. I mean, I saw refinery explosions and train crashes where people are pretty fucked up, but compared to the military stuff, it was like, baby stuff. And
wow.
This is, you start, people are like, how is this dude still alive with these wounds? You get people like that, like, oh my God, you can't even recognize it's a human being anymore sometimes.
Is that your phone that keeps going off, or is that Dan's?
That's mine, yeah.
Okay,
So
well then I won't get upset that I don't care, as long as Dan didn't leave his phone out there.
No, that's so I'm unfortunately I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor. I'm just kind of checking stuff, and it's saying my blood glucose is low because I just eat a carnivore diet, and so I tend to run low, but I'm fine. I mean, I'm like if somebody saw me with a blood glucose right now, it's probably like 55. They'd be like, "Oh my God, you need to be in the ER with IV dextrose, because your brain can't function." But clearly
seems to be functioning just fine.
Seems to be doing okay. I mean, some people would argue otherwise, but yeah.
So then, when you got activated to go to Afghanistan, are the majority of the trauma doctors that are on like in the green zone in Baghdad or in Bagram, are they orthopedic surgeons, or do they have a bunch of different backgrounds and specialties?
Yeah, they have a bunch of different specialties. I mean, orthopedics is one of the most busy specialty because you imagine all the trauma, arms and legs are getting blown up. Because if you're wearing body armor, you're going to be, most of your wounds are going to be in your extremities that you survive. Like if you have body armor and you don't survive, I mean, if you got chest wounds, you're unlikely to live. But we supported. We had 2 or 3 general surgeons that would do like belly trauma. Like one of the things is, like there's a triage thing. So if somebody gets blasted up, you kind of like, we had, several mass casualties where they would just suicide bomb and blow up, 40, 50 people outside of our gate one time we had happen. So we had all these like 40 or 50 people that were critically injured, and then you triage people and you're like, okay, that guy's brains are hanging out. We don't need to deal with him because he's going to die. This guy has a sucking chest wound. He's probably going to die. And this guy has, this guy's got some blowed up shit, we can take care of him. So you sort through everybody pretty quickly. So you do like the first priority, if somebody's bleeding internally, you got to stop that. So you open them up, you open their belly up, you go in, you find out what's bleeding, you pack it real hard, trying to tampen out the bleeding. And then you try to figure out if you can sew that up. And then, the next thing, once you stabilize them, they're going to live. Then you're like, okay, this guy's leg is broken, or he's got like shrapnel, or he's got, because some of the IEDs they would put, all these
ball bearings.
They cover
nuts and bolts.
Yeah, they cover them with shit in a bag, and they put ball bearings and screws, and then they blast it.
So it goes septic inside.
Yeah, go in there. So you have to clean all that stuff out and take care of that stuff. And so we were doing one mass casualty thing where we would like literally work 40 hours straight because there was just people that you had, and we had like 2 operating rooms, and we were like cranking through.
That's crazy.
So at the beginning,
what year was this?
This is 2007.
Okay,
2007. I was over there, and it was the biggest mass casualty. It was like Dick Cheney was, he's vice president at the time. He was visiting our base, and the Taliban found out about it, and they said, "Oh, we're gonna set up a blowout, an example." There, so they blew all these they blew up these little kids, and it was just kind of crazy shit, because we would have kids, like people hanging out, like the locals would hang outside the gates because we would, give them food, give them clothes. Yeah. They'd play soccer, and so they blew all these people up. It was pretty terrible. War sucks. It's all the stupid stuff people do. And so we were working like 40 hours straight. I mean, it was like the first thing is, I'm in there assisting because I'm not a general surgeon, but I'm assisting like closing up belly, bleeders and stuff like that. And we worked like 10 hours straight, take care of all the like critically injured people that are going to die right now if you don't take care of them. And we had like 1,000 people helping us. I mean, like everybody from the base came in there helping. And like 12 hours into it, it was like, okay, now it's time to do the orthopedics. And it was like all like roaches when the lights came on. Everybody's gone.
Except for you.
It's just me and my other buddy were like, fuck, we got like another 30 hours worth of work to do. And like, had 1 or 2 guys left, and we're like, jeez. Fixing bones and, rotting femurs and putting plates on broken forearms and stuff like that. And so it was pretty exhausting, but it was like the grind. I was there like 6 months. And it was like that every single day. It was like every day there was some kind of trauma to do, like all day long. It was pretty amazing.
Were you working on locals just as often?
We worked on everything. We worked on U.S. forces, NATO forces, Afghan army, locals. Like when we had time, we would like do this sort of work where we would have kids that were sick that needed procedures. We would do that. We would always fill the OR with stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
We I operated on some Taliban guys too. We had prisoners of war, and like if they needed surgery, we would do it. We'd like whatever. We just kind of like the Geneva Code. You got to take care of your prisoners of war like you would anybody else. So we did that too.
Yeah, man. Even in our like remote safe houses, we were out in Barry Cout in 03, and anytime any of the locals got hurt, because like the Russians just carpet mined a lot of those areas. So you'd have like little kids that get blown up, and they bring them to the U.S. base because they know we have the resources, and our medic would do what they could do, but we would medevac those kids too. And I'm sure we were sending them to guys like you.
Yeah. We had several landmine injury kids. I mean, they were like playing in their backyard, and on a landmine and blow off their leg or something like that. And so we had people that they would bring these kids in a wheelbarrow, like the parent, because they're poor as can be. Yeah. And it's not their desire that they're in that situation. So they bring these kids to us in a wheelbarrow. And we're like, okay, we'll do the best we can, type of stuff. So,
man, did that I've talked to you about some of this stuff a few times, but you seem like you've really accept it for what it is very well. Did any of that like darkness ever catch up to you, or is it you just kind of understood that that's the job you signed up for?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, I was very lucky that I had a really good partner, battle buddy, whatever we called them, battle buddies, because we were taking the Army had the battle buddy lingo. I don't know if you guys had that terminology, you guys used it much, but they were like battle buddies, and the Air Force was wingman, and we thought that sounded gay, so we're like, we're going to be battle buddies. Like, we're battle buddies, even though we're in the Air Force. So, but he was, and he was a good guy, and we were both kind of new guys out of residency, where we weren't that seasoned orthopedic surgeon. We were new guys, like, fuck, this is real shit. And you look in the textbook, and there's no textbook on how to put this shit back together. It just doesn't exist, and so we're like trying to figure it out as we go. Some of these injuries are like,
people's bones are probably almost vaporized.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, well, there's, normally you read a textbook, none of that exists anymore. All those structures are gone.
Yeah.
So we're, and he had a really good sense of humor, and there was a lot of like gallows humor stuff that was like, this is like really shitty stuff. This is horrible situations. This is some of the most awful stuff humans do to humans. And we're like, well, we're trying to make the best of it. So we had a lot of just like humor to keep
which you have to.
Yeah, you do.
And a lot of people think that sounds kind of crazy, but it's like if you allowed the emotions to dictate like how you feel, you couldn't get up and do your job the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's people coming in, right?
Yep.
Like for my experience, the majority of the violence that I saw and was subjected to was almost probably 95% of the time was us shooting bad guys. So there's not negative emotions around that. That's actually like a good time, But when we would see a kid come in like that, or I've seen some kids get killed, just in like as an operation plays out, man, that shit fucking like in the time didn't really bother me that much. For me is when I had my own kids, made me kind of reflect as like, fuck, man, those little kids in Ramadi or those little kids in Afghanistan. But yeah, man, I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. You got to fucking deal with it while you're there. And humor is just a way of kind of compartmentalizing that stuff, I feel like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had a lot of fun. I mean, it was a shitty time. It was a shitty, it was like you're in the shit and it's not good, but you had to make the best of it. Otherwise you would get, you would be affected mentally. And I mean, we had like a kid that was like, I remember he was like 5 or 6 years old, and for some reason his parents pissed off the Taliban and they took revenge on the kid, and they basically just tied him to the back of a pickup truck and drug him through like a gravel road for like 3 or 4 miles until his like skin peeled off, his leg got ripped off in the thing, and then they brought him to us, and he was like covered in like road rash burns. His leg was gone. It was like this poor 6-year-old kid, and wasn't his fault,
man.
But they see you're dealing with that shit, and you're like, holy shit, this is really this is like evil. This is actual evil that's being done. But that's war. I mean, because you see the people like talking about the Ukraine, Russian war, and it's like, that stuff sucks. You want to try to avoid that shit whenever possible. I'm sure you're like not a fan of war.
Yeah,
been
for
to
sure.
It's like, it's not a good time. It's like, we need to do, you got to do what you got to do, but you want to avoid that stuff at all costs, I think.
Yeah. Did you rotate through to Iraq too?
I didn't.
No,
I had orders. I had orders to go there just before I got out, and it was kind of funny. And I was fine. I was like, okay, I'll go. I'm good to go. I mean, I got another kid. I had like 2 kids at the time. Like, yeah, I'll go, whatever. And they had a guy that was like, he had quote unquote asthma, exercise induced asthma, and was like exempt from the deployment as a physician, but he was running marathons. I was like, what the fuck? So they kind of called his bluff, and they sent him instead of me. And I was like, well, I'm fine to go. I'm like happy. I just asked, can I go early? It was like something like I had like a kid do or something like that. I volunteered to go early.
Yeah.
And they ended up rotating this guy in that was that was like trying to whatever, get out of deployment, for whatever reason. I got asthma, but I'm running marathons. And so they sent him. So I ended up not going. So, but I had, it was one of those things where, I went once, but it was, I'm glad I got to go.
It was like, for sure, man. I mean, like it always fascinates me when people try and get out of deployments. You hear all these stories. It's like, that is what we signed up for.
Yeah.
And like, I guess in certain circumstances, people signed up just for college benefits, or in your case, like maybe some people just so they could become a doctor without ever really thinking, I'll get deployed. Yeah. But dude, after 9/11, you better fucking expect deployments. That is what it is. Yeah. For some reason, I thought you were in Baghdad, because I remember you told me the story about like I think it was a kid that came in, or a man that was like super septic. And when they lanced his leg, it like squirted all over the ceiling.
No, this is a kid. Yeah, that's so funny. This is an interesting story. So that
was in Afghanistan.
I was in Bagram.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were in there, and we, I think this is one of these mass casualties. We had at mass casualty. We had like 40 people we'd operate on, and this kid came in that I think we had treated like 2 weeks ago, but he returned and he had this huge swollen leg. This is like a 3-year-old kid, and his leg was like 6 times normal size. And we thought, he had a piece of shrapnel that we missed and it was infected, and it was going to be like, you'd cut it open, a bunch of pus would ooze out, which is what happens a lot of times. It's like gross. You wash it out and put them on antibiotics, and that's the end of the day. Well, we didn't have a good way to image it, so we thought it was just a big old bag of pus, and it was swollen and kind of red, and we cut into it, and it wasn't. It was like a femoral artery that had a little nick in it from a piece of shrapnel that had built up all this pressure, and it was like tremendous amount. It's like like a tire that's over full,
Yeah.
And we like pop it. So as soon as we cut into there, it was like boom, a bomb went off. It was like blood. I mean, blood was all over the ceiling, like 6 feet above. The anesthesiologist was like hitting the shit in the fan. He was like, "Oh my god!" He said, "All this blood's leaking out of this kid, and blood squirting everywhere." And my partner got his face full of blood. He was like, his face was like painted black, bloody. And I unfortunately my face was out of the way, so I missed it. So I went in there and grabbed the artery and clamped it to close it, and we got the bleeding stopped. And it was just like, it was like crazy. And then I had a picture. I lost a picture. I had a picture that like the Afghan guy that was like cleaning the OR. He's up on a ladder, like cleaning the ceiling. Yeah, it was kind of like,
fuck, dude,
crazy time. Yeah, it was kind of like, it's some of those things where it's like unexpected. Like usually, like as a civilian surgeon, the OR was kind of almost boring because it was like the same old shit. You want it to be. You want it to be controlled. Everything wants to be like every step. Like when you're doing a knee replacement, it's like step 1, step 2, step 3. It's never changed. It's always the same.
Yeah.
Keep it, routine. But that stuff is like you don't know what you're going to get. It's kind of like
I guess it makes it exciting.
It makes it exciting. You kind of don't want that to be your career as a surgeon, though, because then you're like in the U.S. It's like you don't want like random shit happening. You want
more control of it.
But wartime, it's all bets are off. I mean, because it's like in the U.S., as kind of a carpenter, and like you want tools at work, you want the right equipment, you want the right size. If you need a screw that's like, I can remember we were like, in the U.S. you have like, would you like a 42 or a 42.5 centimeter screw? You're like, well, take me to 42. You can dial it in by half centimeters in some cases. There it was like, I need a 42. Well, we got a 12 and we got a 68. Which one you want? Not even close. You're like, well, give me the 68 and I'll saw it down. And you kind of. So it was like, and it was like, we didn't have the right metals. Like you're not supposed to mix metals. There's a thing like if you put stainless steel with titanium, you get this galvanic corrosion that occurs. And there it was like, just give me what you got. It was like whatever. It was a really like a situation where you just had to improvise.
Yeah. And I'm sure that made you probably a much better surgeon, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one, I wasn't fazed by anything. There was nothing that was like, this is like so bad, because we're seeing some of the worst trauma imaginable. And then you had to be adaptable, which is a good thing. You want to be able to do that.
Well, I mean, you guys get conditioned to most of that stuff in medical school, yeah?
As far as you mean like
is just being conditioned to blood and guts.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me. Blood didn't bother me at all. I mean, I'd seen most operations you come out and you do you're covered in blood. A lot of times, not always. Like a knee scope, you're not, but like a knee replacement when you're like whacking an open knee with a hammer, blood's gonna splat. It's just so you get blood splatter over your mask and over your you wear a face shield if you're doing a total joint. So blood is, you're kind of used
it's
to
like
that.
something out of a fucking horror movie.
Yeah, it didn't bother me. You come in there and you look like you'd been in a mass murder or something like that. It's like
that's right. I remember that's why we were talking about it, because you were saying like the surgical masks. is back when the mask debate was going crazy. You're like, no, it's for us, so people's blood doesn't go down our mouths.
Right. In a lot of ways, that's one of the reasons. It doesn't, like I said, a debate about this. I was not impressed with putting it on to stop viruses. So like, this is not what we use it for, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's, if you're hacking up a lung or something like that in somebody's wound, yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. There's even there's a lot of studies about surgeons wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. Does it increase infection rates? And the data basically shows it doesn't make a difference. So like the mask is kind of almost for that purpose. It's mostly to keep, like I said, you don't want blood or puke or vomit or intestinal contents flying up your nose or into your eyes and stuff like that. So you wear a mask and a face shield in surgery. That's what it's really, really there for. It's not really to protect the patient from viruses. It definitely isn't there for viruses. So it's kind of like, I was like, this is, when the pandemic started, I was like, this is kind of stupid. I'm not really into that.
Well, and so, I mean, when you got home from Afghanistan, how much longer did you practice medicine professionally?
For several years. I mean, I went into private practice. I became the head of a group, and I did that for another, I think, about a decade or so. Yeah, and then I got to where I was like, I'm done doing this stuff for various reasons.
Because you got out prior to the COVID stuff, right?
Yeah. I was out a couple of years prior.
Because it was bizarre. Like it felt like there were so few people that were willing to say the things like you were saying. Yeah. And it's just because it's like, it seems like the whole profession was held at ransom.
Well, they kind of were. I mean, they're threatening people's medical license if you varied from the accepted narrative. And I mean, it was, I have to, I feel for the guys that were stuck in that system. I get it.
Yeah.
But I also like the guys that were willing to stand up and say, hey, this is kind of bullshit. And a lot of them got attacked. A lot of them lost their jobs. A lot of them, had their licenses threatened. I mean, it was just like, it was one of those things where you realize that, I became jaded about medicine, a few years back. I was like, this is not about helping people like we think it is. It's really about bottom line profit. And I mean, like anything, I guess you shouldn't be.
Well, talk about that, because I mean, is that what ultimately made you decide it's time to move past medicine?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm still, generally involved in medicine. I mean, I think, I guess with my career, I got to a point where I started this is how I got in the diet business, kind of the carnivore diet stuff. I mean, I started realizing, nutrition has a role in helping you feel better. And I started seeing in my patients, if I got them to switch what they're eating, they didn't need surgery anymore in many cases. I had people on the schedule for knee replacements, and, we switched their diet to kind of a different diet. And it wasn't carnivore time, but it was low carb, it was ketogenic. And a lot of those patients were reporting that their joint pain was going away. And they were like, I was like, well, that's interesting. Then you maybe don't need surgery if you don't have pain. I mean, there's nothing we're going to, we can only make it worse at this point,
Were you the enemy for coming up with alternative routes to correcting people's issues?
Well, I mean, I was very much a very busy surgeon. I was a very efficient surgeon. The hospital loved me. I was making them a ton of money. I was probably making them millions and millions of dollars, and all the other stuff that goes around surgery in the practice. And then when I started saying, hey, I'm kind of interested in doing some lifestyle stuff, what do you guys think? And they said, we don't really have an appetite for that. It's kind of like, it's good for you, but we don't really think that fits into our business model. And, it's probably not the best thing. You should probably stick to just doing lots of surgeries. And I kind of like, that kind of annoyed me a little bit. I was like,
it should annoy you. Yeah. You can't fucking,
yeah.
You don't want to, and that's, more and more people are starting to get fed up with like the Western medicine approach and big pharma's like involvement and everything for that very reason. That right there tells me you're not here to make people healthy. You're here to make money.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's kind of gross, man.
It's like you think about the pharmaceutical responsibilities. Their responsibilities of their shareholders is to make profit. It's not necessarily to make drugs that are the most effective, the safest. It's to make the most profit, and it really is a conflict of interest. And you think about it. Like right now, I think I saw a statistic: 55% of all television advertising revenue is driven by pharmaceutical companies. So we've got this massive
it's nuts,
conflict
dude.
of interest. And I think 20% of medical school education is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. 50% of my renewal education, to maintain my license. My CME, 50% of that is controlled by pharmaceutical interests.
They control it all then.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Fuck, man. Because I remember like when I was having knee issues and I went and talked to an orthopedic surgeon. And they said,
that was shocking to me.
They said full knee replacement. And I was just like, God, that doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm in pain. But at the time I was 38 and it was like, it doesn't feel like it was bad, but it didn't feel like it was to the point where I even would consider doing something like that. And then I did stem cells, and I'm telling you, man, like you see me move on the mats. I feel fine now.
Yeah.
I feel completely fine. And I never did a follow-up MRI because I don't hurt anymore.
Well, when you showed me your x-ray and the guy was telling you knee replacement, I was shocked. I was like, dude, I don't think so, man. And again, I didn't know, you didn't, because I'd seen you already rolling. I was like, you're pretty damn functional.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose all that. You're going to lose a lot of that. You're going to lose your ability to, there's not a lot of guys out there doing hard jujitsu with fake knees. There's a couple guys that have hips and stuff like that, but a knee is like, that's something you want to put off until you're like 70 if you can possibly do, or maybe the rest of your life. Because you fix your diet and you exercise and you strengthen your knee. You may never need it, which would be really good.
Yeah, but like that's it almost feels like a breach of trust because I've had several run-ins with another one was when my oldest Siler, when she was born, they basically diagnosed her with what's called failure to thrive. She would not eat, and they had no reason for it, or they didn't understand why. But we brought her in, and they're like, if she hasn't eaten or had a bowel movement or peed in this amount of time, you need to admit her into the ER. And then from the ER, we can bring her back to the NICU. I guess you can't just go back to the NICU for whatever reason. I guess that's their local protocol. And once we got to the ER doctor's like, well, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And he goes, we're going to do a spinal tap. And she's like 4 or 5 days old or something. And one of the nurses is like, all right, well, before we do the spinal tap, we have to get an IV run. And she missed probably like 7 times of trying to find a vein. And I'm like, I'm in turmoil because the dad in me wants to punch this person in the face, but also I got to stay in my lane. This isn't my, I have to trust that they're doing the right thing. And finally she missed again. I said, you know what? Like the whole reason we came here is to go to the NICU. Can't we just go to the NICU? Because those people specialize that. And she goes, yeah, we can do that. Let me call an ambulance and we'll run her across the street. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Why is my suggestion being like actually considered by this medical staff? And then when we got across the street, the head doctor at the NICU goes, wait a minute. You're telling me that they were planning on doing a spinal tap on a 6-day-old? Hold on a minute. I need to make an immediate phone call right now because this is not what we do. And then it made me realize it's like, dude, trust your instincts. Because if your doctor's telling you something that just feels off, maybe it is, And like the more people you talk to have these crazy stories where I feel like they're losing trust in the profession,
Well, the last 2-3 years have done nothing to bolster that. A lot of people are very, they see the conflict of interest. They see the maybe not acting in people's best interest, the lack of full informed consent. And again, I not knowing exactly the details of what was going on, what they're thinking of, it's hard to comment for sure. But yeah, physicians make mistakes all the time. They're not infallible. And, like I said, I tell people you've got to not outsource your medical decisions, your healthcare to other people because, you've got your best interests in mind. And, like I said, as a physician, you get, a very short period of time with somebody. And, it's like you're making decisions based on, like in the outpatient clinic setting, you might see them for 15 minutes once every 3 months. And, the other person's like, I got to live in this body 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to, particularly today, you have to and I know that doing your own research is considered like, oh, that's bad. But we used to call that just reading, learn shit,
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with you, investing and educating yourself because I can tell you as a physician, I learned a lot from my patients. I mean, a lot of times they knew a lot of, like if they live with a condition like a chronic disease, particularly one that's kind of rare, they know more about it than I do, most likely, because they live with it 24 hours a day, and they're always thinking about, I mean, the good ones, I mean, the ones that are care are thinking about, how do I fucking get rid of this shit? And what can I do? And you know, I mean, it doesn't make sense to ridicule or belittle those people. I mean, you have to be, you know, someone that, again, collaborates with them, and I think that's a good relationship. But there's plenty of good doctors out there. I don't want to smear the whole profession. There's a lot of people that really, their heart's in the right place. When it comes to, you know, some of the stuff around nutrition, I mean, it's intentional that doctors don't learn about nutrition because that's not the model they're going into.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask, is you see the memes floating around on Instagram and stuff that it's like, to get your MD, it requires like 2 hours of nutrition training or some crazy shit like that. And it's like, I mean, do you literally not go into hardly any as far as medical school?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a featured part. I mean, you learn some of the basics, and I don't know if it's 2 hours, it's probably a little more than that, but it's very, very rudimentary. And it's just, you know, this is what a vitamin deficiency looks like, you know, a few things, but it's not like, you know, this is how you treat disease using nutrition. That's not taught. That's not even considered. I mean, because you're there to dispense drugs, do procedures, order tests, you know, do lab tests. That's the model that you're in. And so if somebody's saying, well, hey doc, how do I, you know, is there something I can do like nutrition and lifestyle? A doctor is not really well prepared for that, at least most of them. Now, some of them actually educate themselves on their own, like I did. And so you can get a little bit more information there, but you know, it's like, you know, you don't go to the plumber to have somebody tell you how to plant roses in your garden.
Yeah.
It's just not the right expert with that. So I tell people it's not where you want to go.
One of my best friends is also a physician, and you'll probably meet him. He's coming in next week actually, but he had a patient that was like diabetic and the legs were all swollen and smoker, just all the worst things. Right. And he gave him a lot of lifestyle choice advice. He's like, what I suggest you start doing, and he prescribed him a diet, and he said, eat steak and fruit. So you'll like this guy. You guys are cut from the same cloth. He was a high level collegiate athlete. He rode for the University of Washington.
Oh, nice.
And he said you should try and move your body more. He goes, start going on daily morning walks. Try and get sun on your skin as much as you can. Like the stuff that you should be doing, right? And then the guy filed a formal complaint against him because he said like he was there to try and get medicine, and this doctor started telling me about all these things I need to do with my life. And it's like, but that supports exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Not only do a lot of doctors maybe not know that kind of stuff because it's not part of their professional training, but the ones that do, a lot of patients aren't willing to receive it either.
Yeah, there's an expectation. I go to the doctor to get a pill. I mean, that's a lot of the, and there's for good reason, because that's usually what happens, right? You go to the doctor, I want to get medicine. That's why you go to the doctor. And when the doctor says, wait a minute, like I had a patient exactly like that. I had this obese female that was coming in for, you know, her 15th cortisone shot in her knee. And I think it was the first time I saw her. And I said, look, this is not ultimately helping you. You know, I think, you know, you need to start, you know, doing this, and I'm not really interested in giving you this injection today, you know, because that's not going to help you. It's chronically just causing problems. And so she again complained to the administrator, and they sent her over to another doctor in our group who gave her shot. But I mean, it was the same thing. It was just like, you know, you try to do the right thing, ultimately the right thing.
Yeah.
And some people are there, they, you know, and it's, you know, I don't want to, you know, there's a lot of patients where it's, you know, that's what they want, and they're just as much to blame. You can't just say, "Oh, it's not your fault because society's bad and there's junk food." I mean, there's, you know, it's, you know,
bro. Everybody knows now. I talk about all the time on the show. Like, if you were to take almost, maybe not everybody, I'm sure there's a percentage of people that think Doritos and soda is good for you, right? Yeah. But I would say the overwhelming majority of the public, if you were to sit them down and say, "Hey, put together what you would consider an extremely nutritious meal," and just describe what that looks like, I think most people could probably describe what that looks like. Most people are just unwilling to consume that, you know?
Well, and that's the thing. That's the nice thing about this carnivore diet is, like, if you tell somebody, hey, you need to stop eating ice cream and cookies and potato chips, right? Which all taste good. I mean, I like that. That stuff still tastes damn
Everybody
good, right?
likes
It
that.
tastes good. It's designed to taste good. It's engineered. I mean, it's an interesting story. I've got a lady that I'll tell you about here in a second. But, if you tell people, hey, don't eat that stuff, but instead replace it with, salad and cucumbers and vegetables, and people are like, man, that stuff sucks. I don't like that. But if you tell them to eat, hey, just eat a bunch of freaking ribeye steak, it's like, yeah, I can do that. And that's why it's been so, so effective. The problem is everybody like, well, steak's bad for me. I can't eat that, which is total bullshit. I mean, but I had a lady that literally worked for the food industry. She was literally she was a chemical engineer working as a food engineer. And her literal job was to make this food as addictive as possible. She told me that. And she said, I've been doing this. I'm 62. I'm retiring. I can't live with myself anymore. I know my whole career has been based on making people addicted to food. It's
and making them sick as fuck.
And she said, look, I want to come work for your company. I'll work for free because I want to make amends. Like, she felt so bad about that. And it's just kind of crazy that they literally know they are addicting people and harming them. And yet
does she go into any of the specific methods of how they make food more addicting?
Not really. No, not really. But I mean, it's pretty well known. I mean, there's a guy named Moskowitz who developed what's called the bliss point in like the 1970s. He got made like $20 million for doing this. And it was just like, you dial up the sugar and the salt and the fat, and you just you sit there, and they literally have done literally high level experiments on humans to say what makes them addicted to this food. And that's what we're up against.
Shit's dark, man.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. But
fuck.
But at the same time, there's people who'll say, well, that's, because everything in the store is like this. They're all competing for this. And it's like, well, it's not my fault because this is the way the food is. And I mean, I get that to a degree, but there is a point where you're like, look, no one is holding a gun to your head and making you eat friggin' gummy bears and Doritos.
Yeah.
Right. So you choose to do that because, one, it's cheap, it's subsidized, it's nutritious. Everybody's forcing it on you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man, just eat some of that. It's good, and it's a hard situation because there's a lot of people that are food addicts, just like they're sex addicts and drug addicts and gambling addicts and, alcoholics and stuff like that, food addicts, but you can't like not eat.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's cold turkey is not an option on this one.
You have to eat, right? I mean, unless you're weird breatharian, but
yeah, I've heard about them. The breatharians haven't been able to pass tests.
They don't last very long.
That's the weird thing, though, is like what you said. Like, there's peer pressure or like societal expectations. Because if I go get a Happy Meal, and I mean, not in my circle of friends that I've created, everyone would be like, what the fuck? But most people, if you went and ate McDonald's, they wouldn't even look twice. And I've supersized it and I'm drinking a big soda, and that's normal. But if I tell people I'm only eating meat, like all the time when I order steak at restaurant, they're like, well, okay, you get 2 sides with that Outback Steakhouse. You get 2 sides with that. I don't want any sides.
Give me another steak.
Are you sure? What? You don't, like, you're a weirdo all of a sudden, It's just kind of a bizarre place we've arrived at. But I remember when I was doing steak and apples last summer, you'd always give me shit for the apples. Like, you still eating those fucking apples? But one thing that you said was you kind of touched on it a minute ago. You're like, one thing that makes carnivore so powerful is it's not just that meat is nutritious, is that you're cutting out all that other bullshit. And I think that's probably an underrated aspect that people take or put consideration on, because it forces you to remove all the unhealthy bullshit that just is around 24/7.
Yeah, that's for sure a huge part of it. I think, I've never said carnivore is the only way, but I mean, it's effective at making you remove that stuff. And it makes it easier to do that because you replace with something that's so frigging kind of satisfying that you're like, okay, I don't want that crap. But I mean, if you can do a kind of a minimally processed whole food diet that has variety and keep that stuff away, you're probably going to do good. Most of us will probably do pretty good with that. And I'm happy to see people do that. The problem is a lot of people struggle with that because, again, if somebody said, hey, eat kale and quinoa salads all day, I'm not going to do that. I mean, even though it's probably not that bad for us, I'm not going to be able to survive on that. I'm going to be starving.
Well, and dude, and I'm actually doing one now. I'm doing an 8-week bodybuilding cut diet just to see how my body responds. But it's primarily, it's protein and then some jasmine rice and some oats and stuff like that. But when I'm dieting and I'm eating like a very strict diet, throughout my life, I found that like you get really sick of the taste of the food. It's like chicken and broccoli. Ugh, I can't have one more bite. I never got sick of ribeyes.
Yeah.
And I did carnivore for the better part of the last year or so. And like every single bite of ribeye, it feels like a fucking treat, dude. Or the tomahawks at your house. Like it's just delicious.
Yeah. I mean, I literally never, like people ask me, don't you get bored of the same shit? I'm like, not really. I like it. It tastes good. I mean,
yeah.
I'm literally like my dogs at this point. You know, my dogs get the same shit every day. They get basically ground meat, ground turkey or something like that. And they don't complain. They're you know, Sasha's up there drooling and dancing around. And she's like 12 and she's like, oh my God.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. Cause I've I've watched my dogs eat before and I'm like, I wish that I had the ability to eat like they do. Cause your dog will eat a whole steak in 15 seconds and just be completely content.
Yeah. It's like, they have joy. They're like, it's just joy for them.
So have you not had like a bite of ice cream in 7 years?
No, I've had like every once in a while. You know, I don't sit there and like, oh, I need to supplement some broccoli or something like that. That stuff tastes nasty to me. But I mean, every once in a while, I'll like fucking have a piece of cake. I mean, but it's not I mean, it's like literally like once every 6 months or something like that. I mean, it's like if my kid's birthday and there's cake and I'm like, hey, Dad, have a piece. Okay, I'll eat a bite. But I don't really like, you know, like plan like, ooh, I'm gonna go have a cheat. You know, every once a week or once a month, I'm gonna have this big blowout cheat thing. But if it happens, I don't worry about it. I'm like, I'm not, it's not a religion to me. It's not like I'm like, oh, I got to do this because I'm the carnivore guy and I can't have
someone's going to see Dr. Shawn Baker
it's
having
kind
a
of
piece
funny
of
because
cake.
I posted a little video up on Instagram and they were like a bowl of like bananas on my counter and somebody, oh my God, you're eating banana. Like, look, I'm not eating that, but I got 3 other people that live in the house with me. They have it. I don't care. But if I wanted to have it, I sure as fucking would.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not worried about it. And I said, look, sometimes I have a piece of cake and I'd rather have a, you know, like once in a while have something that's really good, not like make up some like weak ass fake version of it eat that once a week. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm not, you know, it's because there's people out there eating their keto.
Yeah, your cake's made of almond flour and
it's like,
honey.
It's like, well, if I'm going to do that, why don't I just do the real thing and have that and then not worry about it for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it might be. So, I mean, yeah, but I mean, literally, I eat steak every single day of my life, pretty much without fail. And, you know, there's some days I don't eat at all. I'll miss a meal because I'm traveling and I'll just fast because there's nothing I can get. But I mean, I literally eat 2, 3, 4 pounds of steak every day of my life. I mean, that's pretty much my diet. Sometimes I'll have some eggs. Sometimes I'll have a seafood. Like right now, I'm also leaning out. So I don't know if I got up to, I was close to about 270 and now I'm down to about 250-ish. And so I'm leaning back down. Literally the last 3 years I've spent just trying to get stronger. And, you know, I think I put on legitimately probably 10 pounds of muscles in the last 3 years. At 56, that's pretty good. And I don't take drugs. I mean, people are like, you want steroids, but I don't do any of that shit. But
I love that your bulking plan is eat more steak.
Right.
And your cutting plan is eat less steak.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as that. You know, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's because people are saying, well, this is kind of funny in the low carb community. Like, well, calories don't matter. It's all about hormones. Like, no, calories do matter. You know, it's important to think. I mean, yes, hormones play a role, and there's a difference between eating 2,000 calories of steak versus 2,000 calories of bullshit. Yes, there's differences occur, and you're probably going to be leaner with the steak. But once you've been eating steak for 7 years, the only thing that's going to change is how much you eat. At that point, you know? I mean, I guess I could exercise more, but I mean, I'm pretty consistent. I'm pretty much trained every day. I mean, I like it. I mean, I think you do too. I mean, pretty much every day you do something
for sure
physical or you feel like shit. I mean, you know, like if you miss a day or two, like when you're traveling, you're like, fuck, I can't train. Like I'm going to be going on vacation, you know, in August and I'm like, fuck, I'm not going to train as much and I can't eat like exactly like I want, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to be going to cool places. I'm going to go to Greece. I'm going to go to France. They're cool places, but I'm like, I'd almost rather be at home training and doing jujitsu and eating like I want. It was kind of weird. It's kind of a weird dynamic that you so like your routine that you
no, man, I'm the same way. Like I love travel. I love adventure, but I'm also content being a creature of habit.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're a creature of habit, that is usually when you're performing your best. And so I'm right there for sure, man. What was the transition like becoming someone that like really started to see like your performance and your composition, everything started to become like optimal, eating more meat and less bullshit. Was it a slow process, or was it like, I'm going to fucking try this and see what happens?
No, it was like a 7-year thing. It wasn't like I just like one day I'm like, let me do carnivore. I mean, I had, like I said, I was probably,
it wasn't a thing before you, right? I mean, you literally coined the term.
I did. Yeah. I literally made the carnivore diet is my creation. It wasn't like that much of a stretch to make the diet. And there's a lot of people that have been promoting all meat diets, even going back to the 1700s. There's a guy named James Rollo, who was a Scottish surgeon, was using all meat diets to treat diabetes. And, 1800s, Dr. Salisbury, and then Blake Armstrong, and then some maybe Atkins kind of sort of, but yeah, no, I was like a little bit older than you are now, because you're right at
42.
40. Well, no, I was 42. I think I was exactly your age, and I was like, I'm starting to feel like shitty. I'm older. I'm an athlete. I've still been training my ass off. I won the Highland Games World Championship. I was still like, I used to throw.
I love it. That's just we'll just brush right past that too. I won the Highland Games World Championship.
I forgot. I did about 7 years of Highland, 5 or 6 years of Highland Games. I got pretty good. I won the World Championships as a Masters, but I was like 300 pounds. I was a big dude. I was strong. I had to be. It's like throwing these big fucking cabers and shot putting stuff. But then I was like, I don't feel as good as I could. I'm snoring. I got hypertension. I got metabolic disease. And I was like, fuck this. I need to change diet. So I went through another divorce. So I've been married, twice officially, and then kind of sort of married now, more or less. We've been together 10 years. But so I was like, I'm gonna clean up my diet. I'm just gonna eat less and move more. That's because and I was eating salads and lean chicken breasts, low calorie. And I mean, I'm just like you. I'm very disciplined, and I powered it through. And I was working out. I was working out 3 times a day. I was literally getting up 3,000 jump ropes in the morning, go to my surgical clinic, see patients. At lunch, I go work out, and then I'd come home, put my kids to bed, jump rope another 3,000 times. And I lost I think I lost 60 pounds in 3 months. I mean, I went from like 290 to 230. I was ripped. I was pretty lean. But I was fucking miserable. I was like, I can't, this is like crazy. I can't maintain this. I can't maintain this pace of working out 3 times a day and eating like way too low calories. So then I started like, I got to figure something else. So then I went paleo, and then I went like low carb, and then I went like keto. And this is over a period of about 7 years. And then I ran into this group of fucking nutty people just eating meat. I was like, these guys are nuts. Just like everybody thinks, what the fuck are these people doing? And this was a little Facebook group called
people really do think you're fucking crazy.
Oh, they do. They think you're crazy. Oh my God, you don't have, what about all the fiber? What about the vegetables? And then, you're like, well, I just don't eat them, and I do okay. And now we know, I mean, there's literally probably hundreds of thousands of people have now done this diet. Yeah. It's crazy how many people are doing it now. Like I just said, Hodger Gracie.
Yeah.
He just, you saw the text. It's the best I've ever felt in my life. I was like, well, shit, man. Maybe you're going to get back there and start fighting again. I don't know. I tried to kind of goof. I said, are you going to start rolling again? You're going to compete again? He said, no, I'm not doing that. But,
Dude, he went out submitting Buchecha.
Yeah. So it's hard to top that. Right.
The most winningest athlete ever. He came back and put him away, which was devastating, because Buchecha is a personal friend of mine and my former coach, but Hodger made it look easy, man, which was nuts.
Yeah, and it's kind of like probably just the right timing.
Of course, if they fought again, who knows?
Could be a different outcome,
but that's why I would just ride. I'd ride off into the sunset if I was him.
It's
man.
like some people that you always see the athletes that retire 2 years after they should have, and they kind of diminishes their,
or guys that keep coming back, and that can diminish their shit too.
Yeah.
But how did you come across this Carnivore Facebook?
I don't know.
Page?
I can't remember how I ran across it, but I think I was just, somebody was talking about it. I like, let me check this out, and I literally like stalked them for like 6 months. And I was like,
no commenting, just observing.
So. Then I kind of made a few comments, I think, and asked a few questions, and then finally I had the courage to try it, and it was like 7 or 8 years into change on my diet. I already was like on a ketogenic diet, and already was like not scared about cholesterol and fat. It didn't bother me at the time. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And I mean, I did it. It was like 2016, and I hopped on there and I did for 30 days, and I was like, fuck, I feel good. This is like the best I've felt in 10 years. I mean, I was like, as an athlete, that makes you feel good. And I was like, I'm going to train harder. And then I was doing rowing, indoor rowing, and I like broke like 3 world records. I was like, fuck. I mean, because I mean, literally, I was just
another world record.
Yeah, well, I got world records in a couple sports, but I mean, I was like, fuck, I'm performing really well. And, and my girlfriend Jasmine was like, well, how long are you going to do this for? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe I'll do it for a year. And so a year goes by, and I was like, I'm still doing good. I'm gonna keep going. So and then now she does pretty much. She's like 90% carnivore. She's, she was vegetarian when I met her.
Okay.
Or just coming out of vegetarianism. And I had gut issues, and she's always been real. Like, she never ate junk, and she was always like, super try to health conscious, but it was like messing up her guts. And now she's like, give me a steak.
Yeah.
She's like, I cook every day. I'm cooking steaks for me. I cook them for her. Cook them for the boy, and so it's been an interesting transition. And of course, Rogan put me on his show and that blue thing.
Oh, for sure.
It made every vegan on the planet hate me. I was like, you're the evil guy that eats meat. I didn't care. I still don't. I could give a fuck what people eat. I was like, if you want to eat vegan, that's fine. Maybe don't force it on your kids or your dogs. I think that's kind of stupid.
I remember Rogan was shocked when he was asking about your blood work. You're like, I haven't really taken it lately.
Well, I mean, it's the thing. I mean, it's like, I still, and I've seen tons of blood work, and I've done mine, and I'm more impressed by someone's their imaging studies, like what's going on with their heart, when you can actually see what's actually going on, because the blood, you got to remember, your blood work is changing every 5 minutes. Your glucose is changing. Your cholesterol changes every few hours. Your testosterone's up and down. It's like you're just getting a snapshot, and it doesn't really tell you what's going on. So you're better to look at somebody's body composition.
And you can change that dramatically in a 24-hour period.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's like, did you check it on Tuesday or Wednesday? Which one are you gonna count? Because you can always like game the system, and like, I'm gonna have really good blood results. There's things you can do to make that changes. But it's like, what doesn't lie is, how fat are you?
Yeah.
Right? How fast are you? What is your blood pressure? What do your cardiac vessels look like? And I've had all those things done. They all show like they're pretty good, and I would put myself up as a 56-year-old against most 56-year-olds on the planet and say I'm
every 56-year-old I know.
Well, I mean, it's like, I like I said,
maybe Cam Haynes.
Yeah, well, I don't know how old's Cam.
I think he's about the same age as you.
Somewhere in there. Yeah, Cam, he runs all day long, and I don't have interest in that.
Yeah.
I mean, he can shoot a bow a hell of a lot better. I know that.
One thing you said to me when you were joking about the apples, like, why are you still eating apples? And then you said, actually, in all seriousness, like, the two metrics that I go by is how do you look and how do you feel?
Right.
And if you're happy with those two things, what you're doing is probably working.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm kidding with that. I mean, like I said, you do what works for you. And I mean, I think that's a pretty damn good diet. In fact, I mean, steak and a little bit of fruit for a lot of people are good. I mean, it doesn't work for everybody. In fact, I just interviewed a Masters world champion track athlete, 400 meter, and she's been doing carnivore, and she put fruit in for about a year, and she said, I gained a little weight, and I started having some joint pain, so it didn't work. So I just went back to strict carnivore, and she's currently one of the top athletes in the world. Over, she's like 36, so she's at the Masters level, but she's at the top of the world doing that. So,
do you think incorporating carbohydrates on long, hard bouts of endurance is something that's good or not?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that carbohydrates can have a positive effect on sports performance. I mean, that's pretty clear. I don't doubt that at all. The problem for some people is, if it has an effect where maybe it causes a little bit of inflammation, a little bit of swing, because some people notice that, and it over time it becomes a detriment. So it's like to say is like, in any one given performance, like let's say I wanted to take, break a world record in rowing, I might get a boost by carb loading on that particular performance. Maybe I've done it and it didn't really help, but I mean, some people might. But if I were to say, if I do this every day and I just kind of rely on that, then I mean, for me, and a lot of people like this, particularly as I'm older, it's like, I don't feel as good. I have soreness. I mean, I may just skip training because, some days you just feel like garbage. You're like, I'm just going to skip training. And you try not to have that. But if every day that you have a good day that you can train, you're going to make progress. But if you have days where like your knee hurts, you're like, well, I'm not going to squat today because my knees hurt, and it's like, okay, well, what was the net effect over a 6-month period of time? Like if you're looking over the long haul, it may be a net detriment. So you just have to kind of, if you use it very judiciously and very specifically, I think it can be beneficial. Like when I've had a lot of like athletes approach me about how to do a diet. And a lot of times I'll say, hey, use carbohydrates, find out what the minimum effective dose is and find out when you really, really need it. Like some workouts, like if you're running a marathon and you want to run a sub 2-minute marathon, like I think we've had one athlete that's done that now. He's doing carbs.
Yeah.
If you want to run a 3-hour marathon, you can probably do without it. And I think depending on the sport, like, You know, like when Joe Al did 4 hours of friggin' rolling the other night. That was amazing. You know,
Dude, so
you think about it. You
crazy.
think about like, you know, if you run a marathon, it's like a 4-hour event, but you can imagine doing that and wrestling for 4 hours nonstop. How, you know, because wrestling is way harder than running at a, you know, at a decent pace. I mean, I think anyway.
Well, and dude, like, and it's funny too, because a lot of people thought that he would just chew through everybody.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But dude, like, he talked to me about it. I mean, we've hung out a lot since then and really dissected it. And he's like, what he felt was like every person felt exponentially stronger. And it's like, because he's getting weaker and then a fresh person comes in and skill only goes so far. And he's like, dude, he goes, it seems like every single one of your white belts is over 200 pounds and a good athlete. And I said, you know what? We have a lot of guys like that, you know? It was very different than he was expecting too, but it was interesting to watch.
Yeah, I thought he would just come out and like submit people in 30 seconds and like, fuck it, I'm just gonna be done as quick as possible.
That's what we thought too.
And then when they started being like 3, 4, 5, 6 minute rolls, I was like, shit, man, he's gonna do 50 of these.
And then Eli was 22 or 26 minutes, dude.
Yeah. Well, I felt bad because, you know, like when he went against me, he'd already gone through like 30 some guys. And I was like, well, you know, he's still the world champ, but I was like, you know, and I landed on top of him somehow by some act of God. And I think he had me in a lockdown, and I was hanging onto his head in a crossfade, and I was just squeezing as hard as I can. I was like, maybe I could submit him from this. And I think I had him there for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then he finally squiggled out, and then, you know, he eventually armbarred me. But I mean, I was like, wow, he's got to be hurting, because I was trying to like smash his head and turn his face.
Oh, fuck yeah, you were.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I can. You know, it's like, why not? You know,
dude, he said he went home and he got super inflamed for like the next week.
Yeah, I bet
he said his watch didn't fit anymore. It's really fucking bizarre.
Well, because he said, you know, I knew, because I asked him right after, he goes, how do you feel? He goes, I feel pretty good. I could keep going, which is probably true. But you know, the next day is like when you're like, oh man. I mean, because I remember when I used to play rugby, and you know, on the field, you run into people and you don't feel it. I mean, you know, you're like, you know something that hurts like a minimal, like, somebody whacked me in the head. You're like, fuck it, keep going. And then the next day, you're like, I remember I would like shampoo and there'd be pieces of my scalp missing and stuff like that. It's like, you know, it's just like, it's interesting. So we'll see.
Well, dude, I tell people all the time, because I've learned that lesson enough times, where if I'm rolling and I feel like my knee pop and then I kind of will assess it a little bit, like, oh, I think I'm good, let's keep going. Don't keep going. Right. No, take the rest of the night off and reassess in the morning, because there's been too many times it's like, I think I'm good. And then the next morning you're like, fuck.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I've found is like, if I have like a minor like pull, like I'm running sprints and like I get a little hamstring tweak, I'm like, done. I'm not going to push it, because every time I've pushed it, it turns into a month of limping around. It's like, fuck it, I don't have time for that. So I shut down workouts. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I'm like, done.
Yeah. It's just years of experience and listening to your body, you know? Yeah. Back when you're young and dumb.
And it hates when you happen, because it fucks with your ego.
For sure.
Like, you know, like I remember I was doing like, I wanted to do some workout where I was going to deadlift like 405 for 50 reps. And I got to like 46 and I felt like a pop in my, like a little pull in my hamstring. I was like, I want to go, but I was like, fuck it, I'll quit.
Yeah. No, those are the worst. Yeah. I've fucked myself up deadlifting more than anything, until I got, you see that trap bar on the wall?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, that completely changed my life. Like, I did a workout with lifting north of 400 pounds, and it's also a little elevated because the handles come up, so it's not a true deadlift, but the way that it takes the weight off of your lower back fucking completely changed my life.
Yeah, transfer the weight a little more anteriorly, so you engage, you know, the quads a little bit more and a little less posterior chain. Yeah, I've switched back and forth. I still do regular deadlifts, but yeah, I like the try. I got one at home. Well, you saw I've got one at my house.
Yeah. No, you got a badass gym at the house.
I use that pretty regularly. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's taken me about, I don't know, 20 years of just buying little shit to put in there. You know, it's kind of funny, because this year I bought 3 pieces of equipment that have really allowed me to put on a little more muscle, you know, because when you're training at home, there's only so much you can do. But I bought a little, functional cable crossover machine, cable machine, so you can do a bunch of bodybuilding shit. I bought a belt squat machine, which, you know,
takes all the weight off your back.
Yeah, so you can hit your legs a little harder. And then I bought a landmine, so I can do like these.
I don't know what the landmine is.
It's just like a sleeve that sits on the ground. It's loaded, and you can just throw a barbell in there, and you can do like pushes and rows and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So that has allowed me to focus on some different muscle groups. So I actually put on, like I said, a good probably 10 pounds of legit solid muscle in the last 2 or 3 years. We'll see when
Dude, if you're still putting on that kind of muscle at 56, you know, a lot of people always talk about like, oh, my metabolism slows down. Do you buy into that? I mean,
you know, I think there's some. I don't think it's as pronounced as most people seem to think it is. I mean, we see like, you know.
I always tell people it's not your metabolism, it's you slowing down.
No, it is.
Yeah.
It is a lot of it. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, again, we have that data sets come from people eating standard American garbage for the most part. You know? I mean, you know, you can look at like track and field world performances and you can see a definite decline. But I mean, I think that, you know, given correct nutrition and training, because we don't, you know, up until recently, there weren't a lot of people lifting weights and training hard in their later life. I mean, you know, maybe starting in about the 1980s, you know, but I mean, before that, I mean, exercise was like a weird thing. No one really did it. So we don't have a long period of history.
That's true,
where you got guys like, I mean, you see like guys like, you know, you look at like Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Now, granted, they're taking drugs and stuff like that, but they're still in their mid 70s, looking like savages, looking pretty good. And so you wonder, like, how long are these guys going to be able to do this? Are they going to do it at 95? I mean, why not? I mean, why not?
Well, I've been saying that for the last couple of years, and like you're part of that era too. If you look at like you, Cam Hanes, Joe Rogan, they're showing that that generation of men are showing you can still not just be like a good athlete, you can be an elite athlete.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of it is, you know, you got to be a little bit able to set your lifestyle up that way. I mean,
of course.
If you're working like, you know, 90 hours a week and you're grinding at the factory, it's tough. I mean, it really is. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I work from home. I can kind of dictate my schedule. I work all the time. I work every day, 7 days a week. And but I'm, you know, the work I'm doing is not physical labor. So I train, you know, I train just like, you know, like anybody should.
Going back to the steak thing, because a point that I wanted to ask you about, because I know a lot of people are curious. I've heard you say like, "Hey, I've been eating steak and I don't have scurvy yet," right?
Yeah.
Can you literally get 100% of essential nutrients through meat?
I believe you can. And the reason I say that is because it's been demonstrated many, many times, not just by me and many other people, but historically. I mean, we've had people that do that. Now, you may not get the RDA, you know, the RDA requirements for manganese and folate and, vitamin C for sure. But again, you have to remember that RDA was based upon a standard diet, eating, you know, 50% grains and 60% carbs. And the physiology changes when you eat a different diet. Like for instance, we know, for instance, that if you're wearing a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, and you look at the direction, they say, don't take a bunch of vitamin C because it'll throw that up, because those molecules are so similar. They share a lot of the same transporters. They compete with each other across the gut, across mitochondrial membranes. So, I mean, again, if you have a lot of glucose floating around, your vitamin C efficacy is lower. You don't absorb as much. There's competition across different pathways, and there's all kinds of compensatory things that we see. You know, for instance, most people don't know that red blood cells actually recycle vitamin C, and so I mean that's one example. There's all kinds, and what I'm seeing is people that have been doing this diet for not just a few months, but like decades. I mean, there was a Harvard University study on this, and I think the longest person on the diet had been on it for 28 years. And I just interviewed a guy that's been doing it for 40 some years, 40, 43, 45 years. There's a gal up in Canada that's been doing it for 65 years. And, you know, I mean, it's not to say that, you know, sometimes maybe they might have something off the plan occasionally, but I mean, effectively, me eating a piece of cake once every 6 months doesn't in any way change. It's not like, ooh, I'm saving up all those vitamins. That's where I'm getting my vitamins from one piece of cake every 6 months. You know, I think, you know, and this is something that there's a guy named Vilmar Stefansson, who was a polar explorer from the 1920s, and he lived up with the Inuit Eskimos for 12 years, and he basically said, look, if you have meat with enough fat, because you can't just do it on pure protein, you'll die. You got to have fat. It's all you need, and I think that's accurate.
Do you think there's anything to be considered with like genetics or where you're from? Because I know, like you mentioned, the Inuits, obviously they only had one source of food, and it was animals. But people that grow or live on the equator that have like a year-round growing season, do you think the physiology has changed based on where you're from?
I think that your tolerance for certain foods changes. I mean, we know, like, for instance, there's a whole bunch of people that are lactose intolerant. They don't have this persistent lactase enzyme. And so I think the things you can eat besides meat expands, what you can tolerate. Like some people will notice that, a lot of people that tolerate grains better are from the kind of the Middle East part of the world, because that's where grains initially were sort of harvested. And so I think your genetics can dictate the variety of foods you can safely consume without, negative. But I think pretty much all humans have the capacity to thrive on meat. I think that's a function that's essential to our evolution. So I think if you couldn't have, how do you think about humans survived ice ages? There's not a lot of mangoes growing in the ice age, right? So it's like, like, how did we survive all that? And I think our ancestors were the ones that survived that, and that's where we come from. So I think I've seen some people that do a carnivore diet and they're like, it's not for me. I don't like it. I didn't feel good. I mean, that happens, but I think fundamentally, I think it's a food that is a complete food. I mean, it's like, it's literally what we're made out of. I mean, if you cut a human open, being open, and I've cut a lot of humans open, they're red meat animals. I mean, you cut your arm, there's a bunch of red meat in there. That's what you're physically made of. Every cell in your body is, made of a certain amount of substance, and the things that you're made of are the things you actually need. I mean, I know it sounds kind of simplistic, but it really is that simple.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's like one of our newer students, Steven, who you've met, Steven, the newer guy that's in the ice bath every night. He switched. He's doing basically carnivore now. And he's like, I felt like dog shit for, a period of time. And then he's like, and then it went away. And now I feel good, And you hear that referred to as the keto flu or whatever. Do you know the actual, what is actually happening physically through that process?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that are happening. So for one is, as you lower your carbohydrate, concentration in your diet, your insulin level will fall. I mean, insulin is something that's secreted by our pancreas, our beta cells, to sort of help us with carbohydrate metabolism, bring our glucose down. So as that happens, our kidneys, with less insulin, on board, our kidneys excrete sodium, and they don't hang on to it much. So you lose sodium, you lose water, you just become dehydrated basically. And so when you get dehydrated, you feel kind of like a garbage. So you have to kind of, that's one of the reasons why people say, hey, make sure you increase fluid and electrolytes when you do that. The other thing is, when we're not, our body's a little bit plastic. It can change, right? It adapts. And so one of the things that happens is the cells in our gut that are responsible for absorbing, carbohydrates versus fat and protein have a certain amount, and that changes over time. If you're not exposed to any carbohydrates, well, then the cells that are responsible for that are like, well, what am I doing? And so your body kind of our gut turns over every day. And so it's like, we're not going to produce as many of those. And so there's these subtle shifts that happen over time. And so it takes a while to adapt to a more fat-based metabolism. It's not like your glucose ever goes to zero. I mean, it's like, even if you never eat carbohydrates, your glucose is always going to be, a certain level, because your brain needs some glucose, your red cells need some glucose, our adrenal medulla needs glucose, our testicles need glucose. So there's always this thing, but you don't need it at the levels that a lot of people have it. A lot of people see, and this is what we see with mental health disorders. A lot of people that are having, horrible, bipolar disorder or anxiety, depression, that often levels out on this diet. It's because they finally have a steady source of energy, and they're not like, very
riding a roller coaster.
Yeah, because you see these people that, they flip out over the minorest things. And it's like, dude, that's not a big deal. And I mean, it's, that's something that I see very consistently. People just kind of get chilled out. And happy.
What would you recommend as a minimum time to try it if you're giving it a legitimate shot?
Well, I mean, I collected data on 12,000 people doing the diet, and we asked this very question, when did you start seeing symptoms resolved? And a lot of people, sometimes people within days, like diabetics or blood glucose will come back down to normal very quickly, but generally consistently about 3 months.
Okay.
3 months seems to be like, it's either going to work or it's not, and if you don't have any benefit by 3 months, I'd say, dude, go do something else,
Okay.
But I mean, I think that's a pretty fair thing. Now, most people, 90 days is a long commitment for a lot of people. So we always do these 30-day challenges.
But 90 days is nothing in the grand scheme of life.
But I mean, a lot of people don't have discipline, as you know. They're like, they're like, oh my God, they can't, oh my God. Well, we had well, I was going to do this, but then my buddy called me up and we went out drinking and we ate pizza.
Yeah.
That shit happens. So 90 days, but 90 days really is, I think, a fair trial to say it's either going to work or it's not.
Yeah. A couple more questions and then we can wrap this up. But what is your opinion on dairy products, and do you think it matters if they're raw or not?
Well, you know, this is something that, again, this is one of those sort of answers where it depends. You know, I still consume dairy from time to time. Like right now I am. I'm doing, you know, as I'm leaning out, I'll tell you what I'm eating. I'm eating a big giant 2-pound ribeye steak for breakfast. And then the evening I have like some non-fat Greek yogurt and a little bit of salmon. That's my diet to lean out right now.
So that's your whole day. You basically eat one big meal a day and then just a couple
little snacks. I might have 2 little boluses of, you know, right now, this is what I'm, you know, and I find that works really well for me. So I'm eating about 200 grams of fat and about 300 grams of protein. It's about 3,000 calories, something like that. I went from, whereas before I was eating about 300 grams of fat and 300 grams of protein and about 4,000 calories. So I've dropped about 1,000 calories, 100 grams of fat, and you know I'm doing fine with that. But with the dairy, what I find is that when I tell people going to the diet, I say, you know, unless you have a known dairy intolerance, leave it in for now, and then you can kind of play with that. And not all dairy is the same, for sure. I mean, it's are you drinking straight up, you know, pasteurized, homogenized milk, or are you having, you know, a piece of, you know, fermented, you know, cheese or something like that?
Yeah.
There's differences in how we tolerate dairy. So raw dairy, I think, is fine for most people. I mean, there is a slight risk of, you know, contamination, which is, it's pretty minimal. I think in the United States, there's like 20 people a year that get sick from dairy. I mean, it's like, it's like not many.
Yeah.
It's like almost all of those people are consuming raw dairy, however. So, I mean, the risk is there, but it's like getting struck by lightning. It's like pretty unlikely it's going to happen. So it's generally pretty safe. I mean, you know, if you may not want to go to the guy on the side of the road selling raw dairy from his sick goat or something like that. But I mean, you know, in general, it's fine. And I think it's something that, you know, dairy is generally a pretty nutritious food. I mean, it's a great source of protein. I mean, it's got good fats in there. And so, I mean, generally, I think it's something good. But now for some people that are like stalling out on weight loss and still having autoimmune issues, that's something that I would consider like dropping. But for the average person, it's probably fine.
Got it. And then obviously eggs, superfood. Yeah.
Eggs are great. Yeah. I eat a lot. I'm not eating them right now, but I mean, I'll go to periods of time where I'll crush 20 of them in a day. I mean, it's no big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, when I was in the Air Force, it's kind of funny. This is back in the day when I was eating only egg whites, which is kind of, I don't know.
Isn't that crazy? That used to be the thing.
Yeah, that used to be a thing. This is in the 90s, and I was stationed. I was a nuclear weapons officer, and we would go downstairs, you know, 100 feet underground where the launch control center was, and we had the topside security forces guys up there, and the cook and the facility manager, and I would order my food, and it was like an egg was a nickel. And I would say, hey, dude, I want an egg white omelet with 50 eggs. So the poor guy was up there
like, who's
separating out
down
50
in the
eggs.
dungeon?
Yeah, and I actually got a call back from the base, and they said, hey, Lieutenant Baker, man, you're fucking going through all our eggs. And I said, well, I'm paying for them, dude. And they were just kind of complaining. I was like, hey, I'm paying for them, you know. And some of the guys, I'm sure a couple of the cooks probably spat in it because they're like, fuck this dude. But there's one guy was kind of lifting. He understood. He's like, yeah, man, I got you hooked up. You know, so, but anyway, I used to see a lot of eggs.
Man, I used to tell people like some of the best military chow halls were on deployment.
Yeah.
Like, remember those big, like, especially if you were in like Kandahar or Baghdad, like in a big base, they had like salad bars, endless chicken breasts, endless hard-boiled eggs, and you could just I got some of the best shape of my life on deployments.
Yeah,
Probably not your deployments because you're doing, you know, 20-hour days in the OR.
Well, but I mean, we worked out almost every day we could. So,
Okay.
I mean, there was nothing else to do. I mean, it was literally nothing else. It was like walk from your little freaking bee hut, you know, a little, I don't know if you know what bee huts were, but they were little, like, you know, just like eight man little huts with, you know, you're on a cot, you got like your room was like 8 feet square, 8 by 4 or something like that. And a little, I think it was an aluminum roof or tin roof, and you know they're rocketing around there. Fuck, this is so. And we literally walked to the hospital, walked to the dining hall, walked to the gym. I didn't drive. I wasn't in a vehicle for 6 months.
Yeah, isn't that nuts?
Vehicle, and we didn't have silverware. It was all plastic forks. And they were so flimsy. You'd always have to get 3 because they always break
snap.
And pop off and hit you in the eye and shit like that. But yeah, the dining facility was. I mean, KBR was contracted, and they had tons of food. I mean, you could get lean, you get in shape. There's plenty of, but you get fat as fuck too.
Oh yeah.
There's desserts everywhere.
Yeah.
And we had like civilian contractors. I remember we had this one guy who's walking around. I mean, he got hurt in a suicide bombing, ended up dying, but he was like 400 fucking pounds. Jeez. And he had a piece of, he had a ball bearing go through his brain. I mean, I remember seeing like, it was like we could see the track, and it was like, and he didn't live, but I mean, it was like,
dang.
So there were some people that were eating too damn much too.
Yeah. Well, it's like anywhere, I guess. You can fucking make it work for you. You can take advantage of it. So, well, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
I'd pick your brain on jiu-jitsu skills, but I'll do that later.
Yeah, we can do a jiu-jitsu episode next time. Yeah. It's funny. People love the jiu-jitsu episodes.
Oh, nice.
Like I wondered since I started the podcast, and a lot of people know my background as a police officer and as a ranger and stuff. And I thought they'd want to hear a lot about that kind of stuff. Every time we talk about jiu-jitsu, I get emails. They're like, more jiu-jitsu, nice. More jiu-jitsu. Nice, so, yeah. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'll put your contact info in the show notes below. So when we wrap this up, if you give that to me, do you have emails or anything that you interact with either like potential clients or fans or anything like that?
What do we got? I think, obviously my social media is a lot of people send me.
Is that the way to do it? Just direct them to your Instagram?
Yeah, I mean,
then?
I think that's because I've got, my social media's gotten pretty, it's about 1 million right now. So it's getting, all together with all the things. So it's getting tough to like answer every message.
I hear that.
So we've got some people that can kind of direct that stuff. So go to any of my social media. You can just DM me on all that stuff. So
okay. And then you have your YouTube channel that's putting out content all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. We're uploading pretty much a video every day. So yeah, that's going pretty well. So we hired a team of editors, and so we're trying to upgrade everything. So finally, it's been a lot of fun though.
All right, well, cool, man. I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll do it again at some point in another 2 years.